Double be done. Tell a friend, bring a friend. Lights, camera, action, let the show begin. Beverly Digital Network. Now we locked in. Double be done.
It's clear. We can see it good enough.
Let it shine. Now that should have made me feel a little better. You know, as a little girl, I tell folks we'd be singing that at Mount Nebo, and I didn't know they were talking about the life that's in me. But now I understand that life, and that makes me happy. So welcome to Smith Robertson Museum and Cultural Center, where today we are honoring a man who believed in hope, for honoring a man who believed in faith. For him to start in Memphis, Tennessee, and say to himself, I'm gonna do a solitary walk. And he got to Hernando, Mississippi, and we know what happened to him. But the walk didn't stop. It kept going. And that's what we need to do today, people. We need to keep going, because at the end, there's gonna be some results that are gonna be great. And that's what James Meredith, Mr. James Meredith, was all about. So we're going to start the program with a welcome from our Chief Administrative Officer from the City of Jackson, Peter Tableson.
Good afternoon. Pam Jr. is a tough act to follow. On behalf of Mayor John Horn and the entire city of Jackson, please allow me to welcome you to 60 years of walking forward, celebrating the legacy of James Meredith and his efforts to make Mississippi a better place for all. So much of our time as government officials is spent wrestling with everyday issues, such as road and bridge improvements, mowing grass, public safety, and balancing budgets. All of those things are important, but as Director Junior and I often discuss, a city should be, in fact, the city must be more than a vehicle to deliver core services. To be vibrant, a city must have cultural engagement that celebrates the range of human experiences, takes pride in connecting us as fellow human beings, and highlights both struggles and successes. That is why we are here today. As a child growing up on the campus of Tougaloo College, I was privileged to hear Stokely Carmichael, by then Kwame Ture, speak during a 10th anniversary event of the March on Fear. Now, 5 decades on, I'm truly humbled to be here on behalf of the city of Jackson, welcoming all of you to this space for this occasion and giving you the welcome that this city failed to give Mr. Meredith in 1966. My mentor, Supreme Court Justice Reuben Anderson, the first African-American graduate of the University of Mississippi Law School, that summarized the life and legacy of James Meredith by saying one time that James Meredith was the bravest man Justice Anderson had ever known. Period. A life like that is worth celebrating, it's worth remembering, and it's especially important as we lean into the challenges of today of continuing to fight for equality and justice for all. And by the way, Director Junior and I have a plan to repair the roof and improve the air conditioning in this facility before the end of the year. Welcome to the city of Jackson.
Thank you so much, Chief Administrative Officer Peter Tableson. Let's give him another hand. We're going to keep the program moving. Next, we have our former Mississippi State Representative, the Honorable James Jim Evans.
Oh, we can't understand. In the book of Revelation, chapter 21, verse 6, you'll find these words, 6, 7, and 8. Jesus, for you Bible scholars, this red letter stuff. Jesus said that I am the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end, which translated means I have full authority over the kingdom of God, who gets in and who doesn't. And he said the overcomers are in. Well, verse 8, I want you to remember this. Verse 8 starts with but the fearful. The first category of those that are not given in heaven were the fearful. And Jesus made it clear. He said, because you didn't get the spirit of fear from me and my Father. You got the spirit of fear from your father, the devil. My Father gave you the spirit of a sound mind and confidence, which overcomes all fear. Thus says the Lord. James Howard Meredith believed in that. And just as Abraham and Moses did, when God called him to go, he started walking on faith. Let us pray. To him who's able and who said be, and all that is was. To the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jesus Christ. We come today thanking you, dear Father, for your presence in our midst. We thank you, Father, for the life of James Howard Meredith. We thank you, dear Father, for the resurrected Jesus Christ, and we ask that his resurrected power might energize our efforts as we move forward.
We ask, dear Father, that you will help us to know your mind in all that we do, that we might walk humbly in your holy and powerful truth. Knowing, Father, that you said in your word that truth and justice is the doorkeepers of freedom and peace. Truth and justice leads to unity, unity to strength, strength to freedom, and then there's peace. We ask, dear Father, that you will grant us peace, that we continue to walk the path that Dr. James Howard Meredith walked fearlessly. And we pray, Father, that we will walk fearless ourselves, and that we will be guided and energized and empowered by the power of the resurrected Christ. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Next, we have on program Mr. Tony Bowles, who was the archivist at Tougaloo College.
The occasion. The occasion is entwined, this place we call Mississippi. Southern breezes, winding roads and red hills, hanging moss, still bayous, blooming magnolias, corn patches, and cotton. The occasion contains we the people, us, they and them, the high, the low, the rich, the poor, the haves, and the have-nots, the franchised, and the disenfranchised. The occasion includes the native son, Richard Wright, who said he had to leave the South so that he could better understand it. The occasion must herald the names of Medgar Evers and Merlin. The occasion includes Goodman, Cheney, and Schremer. The occasion should embrace the name of Clyde Kennard, who never had the opportunity to walk the halls of the University of Southern Mississippi. The occasion must not forget Mac Part, who came to his violin in Pearl River County. The occasion should recall the names of Gibbs and Green on the campus of Jackson State University in 1970. The occasion cannot forget Gladys Noel Bates, Reverend George Lee and Belzoni, and a young teenager from Chicago named Emmett Till, who was thrown from the murky depths of the Tallahatchie River. The occasion embraces the Tougaloo Nine, Joan Trump Power Mulholland, and Moody, Reverend Edward King, Aaron Henry, and Fannie Lou Hamer. The occasion has witnesses in places like Canton, Benton, Yazoo, Louise, Mississippi, Itabena, Holcomb, Grenada, Sardis, Batesville, Hernando, Como, Coldwater, Memphis, Tennessee, and Jackson, Mississippi. The occasion should celebrate that Tougaloo College, in June of 1966, answered the call of James Meredith and stood with him against the lingering vestiges of the Old South. The occasion compels us to commemorate that 60 years ago, James Meredith challenged our state for people and this nation to search out and again the ideals of a true democracy, which cannot exist in the shadow of hate. And finally, the occasion is that through high and death, we call upon the better part of our humanity. This is the occasion.
Good. That was really good. That was really good. You know, in 2016, June of 2016, it was a Sunday afternoon. And from this place, probably about 40 of us. We had a program, and we got outside, and we started marching toward the Capitol. Now, Mr. Meredith said, I'm not marching with y'all. But he saw us. And he said, I guess to himself, I'm getting out of this car. And he walked with us to the Capitol. That was an amazing day. And if you feel so compelled, we can do it again. Now we'll have some mighty good singing from Miss Chandra Wise and the Grassroots Gospel Singers, singing Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Bring with our harmonies, all liberty, let our rejoicing let us march on till victory is won.
Has Ms. Arthur Brooks made it yet? Next on program in memorial, we have Mrs. Doris Griffith Brisbane.
Hello, everyone. Honoring God and respecting all of you that are here today. It is so wonderful to be able to do memorial remarks in honor of Brother Meredith. We honor the memory of the courageous men and women who stood beside or supported Brother James Meredith in the struggle for civil rights, equality, and justice. Their dedication helped break barriers, expand educational opportunities, and advance voting rights for countless Americans. From attorneys who fought landmark legal battles to activists who marched in the face of violence and intimidation, their sacrifices changed the course of history. Though many of these leaders are no longer with us, their commitment to freedom, commitment to dignity, and equal opportunity continues to inspire future generations. We remember their service. We remember their courage. And we remember their enduring impact on the nation. We pay tribute to Martin Luther King Jr., whose leadership, vision, Their commitment to nonviolence change inspired millions and strengthened the movement for equality. We remember Thurgood Marshall and Constance Baker Motley, whose legal experience helped challenge segregation and secure women's right to attend the University of Mississippi. We also honor Stokely Carmichael, Floyd McKenzie, and Cleveland Sellers, who joined the struggle for voting rights and racial justice during the March Against Fear and throughout the broader civil rights movement. Their courage in the face of adversity helped advance the cause of freedom and equality for all Americans. We remember the countless members of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Student Nonviolence Coordinating Committee, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the Congress of Racial Equality, and the Legions of Defense and Justice, led by founders Frederick Douglass Kirkpatrick and Ernest Thomas, whose dedication and sacrifice helped transform the nation. On the local scene, other sung and unsung heroes are listed. Dr. Hollis Watkins Muhammad, Mr. John Garner, Mrs. Dorothy Benford, Mrs. Eneva Mae Pittman, Mrs. Evelyn Banks, Mrs. Lily O'Reilly, Dr. Willie G. O'Reilly, Dr. James Anderson, and Mr. Bob Moses, Robert Bob Moses. We still acknowledge and thank Sir Reverend Ed King for his service as well. Their work alongside or in support of Brother James Meredith helped open doors of opportunity, challenge injustice, and move the United States closer to its promise of liberty and equality. Today, we honor them and others who may not have been noted as the program moves on. I'm sure you'll hear some other names. We thank our God for sharing them with us. So we light a candle signifying that the glow of their servitude keeps showing us the way to our promised destination. This is the candle that signifies the light that will continue on as breadcrumbs to help us to the destination that God has for us. Thank you.
And now we'd like to recognize our special guests. If we have any family members here, you can either wave your hands or stand up. We have in front his sister. You want to raise your hand so they can see you. And his sister's daughter. And I see Miss Meredith over there too. Classmates of any. Longtime friends. And 66 marchers. Thank you, thank you. Now we'll have Ms. Meredith Coleman McGee give a biographical sketch. We stand honor of James Meredith, the America that created him.
Hello, everyone. Is that correct? It's just 3 family members here? This is my mother. She's the youngest sister of James Howard Meredith. There are only 3 of them left. This is my sister, Evelyn Coleman, and my mother, Hazel Janelle Meredith Coleman Hall. 5 names. Well, My uncle was born J.H. Meredith with initials, June 25th, 1933. His father was Moses Arthur, famously known as Cap Meredith, who was born in 1891 in Noxapater, Winston County, Mississippi. And my grandmother was his second wife. He was the oldest child of, her oldest child, and my grandfather's seventh child. And this is the biography that I wrote on my own. This is the second edition. The first edition was commercially published by ABC, Clio, Prager Publishing, and I got the contract changes and I produced the second edition. And I wanted to say, my grandfather, known as Cap Meredith, was a sharecropper until 1923. And he went to the landowner and he gave him advice on how to make the crops better. And the white landowner told him, now Cap, if you want to run something, go buy your own land. And that's exactly what my grandfather did in 1923. He bought 84 acres of farmland. And he and his wife moved there and they had, I think, 3 children in 1923. And he paid his tax. And at that time, less than 6% of blacks in this state were registered to vote. And then I'm going to skip up to on this, and I'm going to tell you what Miss Fanny Alice told me. She told me when I interviewed her, first, I started interviewing people in 2005, and I continued to 2012. The first edition was published March 21st, 2013, and I did the second edition in 2019. Miss Fanny Alice was a neighbor of ours, and August the 18th, 1963 is the day that my uncle graduated from the University of Mississippi, 10 days before March on Washington, and a few months after the assassination of Medgar Evers, who was a dear friend to our entire family. And the day that he graduated, the U.S. Marshals were still protecting my uncle. And Miss Fanny Alice told me she was in one of the cars and the U.S. Marshals drove them to the state line. And he said, you on your own now. And she said, just like this, yes, yes. He said, you on your own. And that was the day that my uncle was informed that he was on the Klan's hit list. And he decided to take his wife, his first wife, Mary June, and his only child, John Howard, who was 6. And they moved to Nigeria, and he studied and got his master's in economics. And then he left there and he enrolled in Columbia School of Law. Now, some people said that James Meredith just simply dropped out of the civil rights movement. He didn't like the word civil rights. But if you had a choice and you was on the hit list and you already know that the people who are on the hit list are getting hit, you got a choice. You stay here and get hit, or you live, and he make the right choice as far as I'm concerned, because he's still here, 92. He's 93. June the 20th. And now I want to do the March Against Fear. My second cousin, Catherine Battle Terrell, I interviewed her husband, who helped my uncle organize the people in Memphis. that started off with him at the Peabody Hotel. He said there were 25 men that walked with him from the Peabody Hotel to the state line. And there's one fallacy about the march. Some people think that he was just the only person there. He came here with people from New York, and after he got shot, there were a whole group of men waiting to join. And he never made it there, but they were still planning to. So it was organized, and it was his mission to register voters. He told me, when I told him I was writing this book, he was so proud. He came to my house often and sat on the couch in my living room that used to belong to his mother and his older sister that was purchased in 1950 to talk to me about anything I want to talk to. So yes, I'm authority on the life and times of James Meredith. Because at first he was my uncle. And from 2005 to 2012, I was a jail student. I organized the 2009 James Meredith Walking Spirit. I took the library when he was talking about the ABCs and what you need to learn for early education. You got to teach your children at home. I went with him to the prison, me and my mother, in Atmore, Alabama, and I would never forget the sound of the bars when they closed. It said, click. I felt like I was in a dungeon. And you know what Mama said to a room full of lifers? He said, you are men. You have purpose. Live. Still be leaders. That's what he told me. You know what else he told me? I wrote it down because then I was a student writing down everything. For all those years, I was writing down. He said, let no excuse stand in your way. And that really struck me. And a lot of things. And I'm here today to honor James Howard Meredith and his contribution. Oh, and guess what? In Tennessee, they have a voting building. It says James Howard Meredith Voting Precinct because they understood the value of what he did and how he ricocheted voter registration because we only had 5% of blacks registered in this state before then. And then it increased because as a black people, we have a lot of urban supply because we get past one thing, we got to get past another one. I don't even know how much time I had. They gave me 7 minutes, and I know I can go. So I'm a regular call me again, and I was here to give you some background. I would tell 2 stories. My grandfather used to tell a story that he was born in 1901 because he died at 2 years old. And he would never forget as a boy in Western County walking by Oxford blocks, up and down in the Oxford block. And he was the grandson of James B. Campbell, who was the Supreme Court judge and who fight the 1890 Constitution, which disenfranchised us. And his father, Francis Brown, was educated, and he used to go to his farm, although they didn't leave us nothing to will. But anyway, my grandmother used to tell me a story because her grandfather was a county court judge in a county. His name was Harvey Davis. And when she was a child, her grandmother, her name was Roxanna, but she went out Roxy. Of course, she could have been part Choctaw, white, and African, with LA line. But anyway, she was Indian, and my mother's first cousin, when I interviewed her, she told me it was so long she could sit on the But when she was a girl, her father asked for her aunt to bring her to his law office so he could look at her. And I thought that was so horrible. That her father asked to look at her through the window. But I wrote a poem about it. But all of that is a part of our existence. And I think it's part of, first of all, my grandfather Cap, um, he was a very honorable man. He didn't drink, he didn't chase women, he didn't smoke, he was strict to business. And he could count how much money he was getting for his car before he could write it down on paper. He was a bad boy. He had a fifth grade education. And my grandmother had an eighth grade education. He missed the opportunity to get a good job. So because he didn't have an eighth grade education, so it was his mission for his children to at least get a high school education. And they all did, and a few of them got a bachelor's degree. And my uncle, James, was the first one to get a law degree. But I think in all of that, my grandfather was my uncle's greatest influence. And he died at 65. One thing that I learned from my grandfather, he did not leave his paid for installed to his children. He sold it to James Howard Meredith because he was a visionary too. All of the children were leaving and going to Detroit, Florida, St. Petersburg, Florida, joining the military, and he envisioned that his wife one day that he would leave first and his wife would be there on the farm by herself with nobody to help her. So he sold it to him, and they built a house on in 1960 on Allen Street. And that's just part of the story. Thank you for being here to honor my dear uncle. I really appreciate you, and I love all of you. Power to the people.
Let's give her another hand. It's always good to have this story in family, because everybody's not going to do the work, and I know that Meredith has done the work. You know, when we talk about this other thing, you know, people say veteran of the civil rights movement. Now, the movement is still here. They're not, they're activists. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring up Dr. Flannery Brown. Good afternoon, family friends. Ooh, come on, get it, tell me. Good afternoon, family friends. Oh, that sounds so good. I want to certainly thank the organizers, Dr. Sibley, Mrs. Meredith in her absence, and of course, Dr. Meredith and his absence as well. I first heard the name James Meredith when I was living in Los Angeles as a new bride in 1962. When I heard about this man who had the gall to try to enroll in a white institution. Now, I talked about that last night, so I'm not going to reiterate that. But what I want to share with you in my 10 minutes, I believe, is that when I heard his name, and then I moved back to Mississippi in 1963, and I had the honor and the privilege of meeting him. So we have to have a relationship with the civil rights movement since 1963. I probably am the oldest thing in the room. I'm looking around, but I probably am the oldest thing in the room. And that's good because I'm still here as well. We'll be 84 in August. All right, so as I learned about who he was and what he was doing and what he was trying to get done, and as many of you know, this was a very controversial issue, and as well. But as I stated last night, and I'll leave you with this point on that, it did not matter to him what somebody thought about him. It did not matter to him what somebody said about him.
It did not matter to him if you agreed with him or not. As long as he felt that he was doing what was right, everything else just was not consequential to him. Even though I heard the name in 1962, upon my return to Mississippi in 1963, in the throes of the movement, particularly in my hometown of Canton, Madison County, 20 miles up the road. Canton, as I write in my book, was a hot spot because every organization that had a presence organized in Canton. Why? Because we were 70% African American. There were 100 African Americans registered to vote during that time period, even though there were 10,000 black folk eligible. And why was that? Because they understood very well that when blacks get power, they use it for the right reasons. So as I began to really understand who Mr. Meredith was and what he was all about, I learned about him more intimately in 1966 when I received a telephone call from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Someone had told him that if he needed to get something done in Canton, he needed to call me. Well, the phone rang. There was no caller ID, so I couldn't do like my did and say hello. But anyway, when I answered the phone, I said hello. He said, is this Lonzie Goodlaw? I said, yes, it is. He said, this is Martin King. I said, yes, sir, how can I help you? As you know, quote, we will be in Canton in 2 days, and I need you to find housing and food for 3,000 people. And just like former President Barack Obama said, yes, I can. And why was that? Because our community was so united. We were so together. Even though we had differences within our organizations, our common goal was just get this right to vote. And this is what it takes. If people are coming into our town from all over the country and from all over the world, we have got to be able to feed them and house them. So when the marches came in, and as you know the history, it began with a one-man walk, not a march, from my understanding. He wanted to do two things. Number one, to walk down through the Delta areas down to Mississippi from Memphis to Jackson to try and get people registered to vote. And number two, as I understand it, was that he wanted to show the world that a black man could walk down a highway by himself without any harm coming to him. But that was not the case. So, as the marchers entered Canton, we had found enough food and housing for 3,000 people. I called everybody who could make an onion sandwich. That these people coming into Canton, we got to feed them. I called everybody, not only me, other people as well. They slept people in their homes, in their yards, on their porches. I wish y'all could have been there. I just wish you could have been there because our resolve to do what was necessary to be done to make this work. So as they came into Canton, we began to have strategies. Mr. Meredith was not with us then because he had been wounded. So Dr. King and other organizational leaders, because this was so important to Mississippi, that they said, we're going to continue Mr. Meredith's walk. But then it became a march because they respected his, even though they didn't always agree, they respected what he was trying to accomplish. And so as we sat down and talked about strategy, one of the first things we wanted to do in my hometown of 7% black people was to organize a rally of sorts that would encourage people and take people to the courthouse. I remember sitting in the home of Mr. Bishop George Washington, as Dr. King told us. He said, I'm not going to be with you very long. My days are numbered. But what I want you all to do is when I'm gone, not if, is when you see discrimination, when you see racism, when you see hatred, that you will call it out. And I was one of those young women, 20-some years old at that time, who stood to my feet. And I made a commitment that if I had an opportunity to tell the story, that I would tell it. And we planned our, as we planned our event for the evening, we were going to march from the Freedom House in Canton down to the McNeil Elementary School, maybe about a block. Well, all law enforcement officers around the state have been put on notice that black folk, I don't know whatever else they call it, but black folk are going to be getting together, assembling at a school ground. They sent everybody who could shoot a gun, or not shoot a gun, to those school grounds. They encircled us, some on the top, the rooftop of the school. So they made a circle around us as we were inside of that circle. Stokely Carmichael. Now, I got a permit. So you need to know these details, because when we talk about the walk, the march, a lot of things went up, a lot of things went with that. It was just not, well, they go march and let them go. We had gotten a permit to assemble on the school grounds. We had not gotten a permit to unroll 2 tents that would allow people to sleep. Because we felt that school grounds, we pay taxes, that the grounds could be used to also house them. There were thousands of people who had converged from my hometown of Kansas. So, Dr. King spoke first. I spoke, then Dr. King, and then Stokely Carmichael. We had just heard the term black power up in the Delta, used by Willie Ricks. And then, when it came to Canada, Stokely Carmichael reinvigorated and gave new life to the term black power. As Stokely was speaking, there were 2 tents that were rolled on the side of the street by the school, on the school ground. Stokely Carmichael, when he finished speaking, we start chanting, we're going to pitch the tent. 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 Because he said, look at all that black power that's out there. What he was saying, yes, they given us a permit to assemble, but we have black power ourselves enough to be able to do what is right. When they ran toward those tents, to start unrolling those tents, then that's when the tear gas came. The tear gas canisters came from the top of the school, all around us. We were falling, choking, crying, screaming, running, being trampled over, just like animals. Now, many of you probably never paid any attention. I don't wear short sleeves because I still wear the scar on my left arm from being trampled, because there was no medical care that would take care of those marches, including me and many, many others. And so when the smoke somewhat cleared, we assembled still and walked down to the courthouse. And then we came back to the Freedom House area. So the overview, and I know everybody has different perceptions, perspectives on the march, but you're looking at somebody who was there, who was tear gassed, who planned those meetings, who helped to implement some of the things that we had talked about during that evening. So I'll leave you with this challenge. I've attended many, many meetings in my life, thousands in my lifetime, in my career, thousands all over the country. And let me leave you with this. I heard someone say about 2 weeks ago, we got to stand up, we got to get ready. How many of you heard that? We got to stand up. My challenge to you, and I say this unapologetically, let's don't get ready. Let's stay ready.
We need to be ready. We need to stay ready. I was thinking about Queen Laundry, and I thought about how they were organizing, strategizing, and mobilizing. And someone told me that the times are new now, but the times are not as new as we think they are. do we mobilize? Those are the things that are necessary, because now is the time. Next, we're going to have Dr. Abram. I don't want to mess up his last name, but he's professor and author of Down to the Crossroads, Civil Rights, Black Power, and the Meredith March Against Fear. Let's give him a hand, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Aaron Bixisi. I'm a professor at the University of Memphis, as Mr. Yours was saying. I published a book in 2014 called Down to the Crossroads. It was a history of the Meredith March Against Fear. And it's probably been the highlight of my professional life to have researched and written. Spoken about this book. It has had such great meaning to me. So I'm very grateful to be here. Thanks to Ms. Junior and to Ms. Palmer for inviting me, to the many veterans of the movement who laid themselves on the line to challenge injustice, not just during the march, but throughout the movement. It is a movement that is full of great drama and also great historical significance that I hope to touch on a little bit in my brief remarks for you today. We're almost at the 60th anniversary of when James Meredith was walking just south of Fernando, Mississippi. As others alluded to, right, he was already famous for integrating the University of Mississippi 4 years earlier. His career sparked violence, the crisis for the Kennedy administration, and it really tested the American Constitution in new ways. It was a signature moment in the American Civil Rights Movement. 4 years later, during his walk, although he wasn't nominated as he was suggesting, it was more or less the endeavor of a single solitary man. And on this track, which was going to go from Memphis to Jackson. The first was to, quote, challenge that all-pervasive fear that dominates the day-to-day life of the Negro in the United States, especially in the South, particularly in Mississippi. He thought this was his mission. He was probably the most hated among white people. He was the most hated man in Mississippi. And if he could walk the roads of Mississippi, then he would show that others could use that same courage. And second, to quote, encourage the foreign unregistered Negroes of Mississippi to go to the polls and register. This is of course, a year after the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. You're just starting to see just the very beginning of taking voter registration. He's passing down a heavy stretch of road. We hear a shout, James Meredith, James Meredith. A white man emerges from the gully, shoots 3 times, bang, bang, bang. And the hero of the old crisis is displayed on the ground with blood dripping from his back and his head, his neck, and his shoulder. For shotgun, the next one would have been one person's walk into a civil rights strategy. Over the next 3 weeks, we would see activists descend upon this people all around the country, all around the world. You would see the titans of black politics come to Mississippi and debate the future of the civil rights movement. The marginal political practical alliances, faiths, and most famously would spawn the cry of Black Power, right? A slogan that would help to define the next generation of the black freedom struggle. Those 3 weeks in the city, called Meredith March, they called the March Against Fear. It's full of inspiring moments of black people overcoming their fears, registering to vote, surging with pride, defying the symbols of white supremacy. It features giants of the movement, Mark King, Stokely Carmichael. But it's a story that belongs to many, many, many others. Everyone from President of the United States down to black sheriff of Mississippi. It's a march full of these extraordinary characters, and none more extraordinary than Meredith. I think survived the attack on June 6th. And he became the political symbol of the liberals. He became something like in that moment, almost like Bloody Sunday a year before it itself, that he was a chance to show the sacrifice of African Americans in terms of democracy. A famous photograph of him riding on Highway 51 was on the front page of every major newspaper. There was a civil rights bill before Congress at the time, and liberals were lobbying for it on the basis of genuine sacrifice. But as we all know, Meredith launched the game his own drama. He would have never did himself with. In some ways, he was conservative. Based on the principle of independence, and then those were conservative bedrock values. It is quite critical of nonviolence. The strategy of the movement at that time. And after he was shot, he regretted not bringing a gun. So when I shot me like I was a goddamn rabbit. Excuse me. Meredith allowed the march to continue in his name, right? But it's also important to remember that he's a critic of the march throughout the ensuing 3 weeks. He hates that march significant was the rise of Sophie Carmichael, right? The new chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, a man born in Trinidad, raised in the Bronx, educated at Howard University, a fearless grassroots organizer here in Mississippi during Freedom Summer of '64. Went to Lowndes County, Alabama in 1965. We created an independent all-black party, the original Black Panther Party. Today, we're fighting something against the kind of nonviolent man march that would come. But Carmichael also taught us the basic vote and ideas of what became known as Black Power in June 16 in Greenwood when the march started. There in the Delta, at a rally at Broad Street Park, there were advanced organizers. When Sophie Carmichael emerged from jail, stepped into this rally in front of 1,000 people that night and said, "We want black. What do we want? The crowd unity to come back with Black Power. What do we want? Black Power." Right? It was a slogan that immediately resonated with so many people. What did Black Power mean in that moment? Frustration with the slow pace of all these federal reforms. You know, you passed the Civil Rights Act, you passed the Voting Rights Act, but it wasn't making a difference yet for most black people in America. Frustration with the limits of nonviolence. Why do black people have to be better just to be equal? Frustration with white liberals, with their uncertain commitments, but also aspirations. Black power was about dreams too, about control over your own community, about pride in your black history, about pride in your black appearance, about pride in your black culture. So black power became immediately this contested term with all sorts of meanings. For the media, they thought, Martin Luther King's not violent, so black power must mean violent. That's not how most black people necessarily saw it. For most people, it was about a way to assert a right to control your own community, to express pride in yourself. And by the end of the march, Sophie Carmichael had emerged almost as like an heir to Malcolm X, who'd been assassinated the year before. He was a guy who was a bullseye for the white backlash, for white conservatives, but a hero to many others. Of course, the person at the center of the story in many ways, certainly as I was writing my book, it was sort of at the narrative center of the book, was Martin Luther King. I thought that the march revealed him at his best, his greatest gifts, even as it was testing him as he'd never really been tested before. He thought the march would be an opportunity to replicate earlier triumphs of the civil rights movement. Birmingham in '63, Selma in '65, where they could use nonviolent direct action to help stoke the conscience of the country and bring about more federal legislation. The march was also kind of a political balance. The other big, which is very important, is for snake and core, which tend to be more of the militant side. It was kind of a moderating influence in terms of translating American march to the rest of the country. After Carmichael used the slogan Black Power, here's what Martin King said the very next day. He said, "You can always tell where the Negro community begins, because that's what engagement ends. We're going to change that when we get to the ballot. That's what we mean when we say power." So he's trying to channel that power into these practical democratic deterrents. This was part of what King was trying to do. But he never used the slogan of Black Power himself. He saw it as a criticism of his house of nonviolence, of racial brotherhood, and so on. Perhaps most significantly for the history of the march, it's King who draws people. He draws the press. He draws especially black people from Mississippi who want to press their hand in his, who want to literally touch the hem of his garment. He has a powerful spiritual role as a testament to his larger role in the civil rights movement. So these are some of the extraordinary characters. They're also extraordinary moments. One of them occurs on June 21st. It's the second anniversary of the murders of 3 civil rights workers in Philadelphia, Mississippi, West Central Mississippi, James Chaney, and Baby Schwerner. And the march takes the detour, so to speak. It's off the march route to go to Philadelphia, but they go there and work with local officials in Neshoba County to organize a march. The problem is that because they're off the main march route, they're not being protected by the Mississippi Highway Patrol the way they have been for most of the march. The police that are protecting them are the same police that are under investigation for federal conspiracy for the murders of Chaney, Goodwin, and Schwerner, which means that they're basically left to a mob attack. They're attacked with eggs, rocks, cherry bombs. King feels a fear, he later says there, that he'd never felt before, a deeper fear than he'd ever felt for his life. And that might be the kinds of experiences that are shadowed with Dr. Beck saying just a couple days later when he's in Canton. He said, I know I won't be with you, right? And part of the reason for the harrowing violence in Canton 2 days later, that Dr. Wright was talking about, was because the state police knew that there was going to be no repercussion from the federal government for this kind of violence. Because after Philadelphia, the federal government still refused to be involved and refused to provide significant protection to the marchers.
Despite all that intimidation in Canton and Philadelphia, the march moves on here to Jackson, where it ends on June 26. An estimated 15,000 people joined this last leg of the march. It was an extraordinary grassroots effort to bring all these people into the march. And the final rally took place in the back of the state capitol. This has become remembered as the endeavor of one single man, fiercely independent, somewhat quirky man, in James Meredith. It ended as the largest civil rights demonstration in the history of the state of Mississippi. So what did the march mean? It's a beginning in the birth of Black Power. It's an end in that it's the last great march of the civil rights movement, the last time all major civil rights organizations come together into one united, nonviolent demonstration that captures national attention. But I think to best understand the impact of the march, you got to look beyond the leaders. You got to look beyond the news. You got to look to the people of Mississippi. Over 4,000 people registered to vote along the route of the march itself. That's just Indian march itself. Perhaps most dramatically in Batesville, a 160-year-old man named Alfonso registered to vote for the first time in his life. Mr. Fonda had been born in slavery. And again, just as G. Meredith originally intended, people defied that culture of fear. The march is still, whenever it came to a particular community, white people would be on one side of the street, black people would be on the other side of the street, and white people were hostile, but we're also convinced that they're black people, they're people in their community. There's no way they were going to listen to these outside agitators. Be part of the same measure. Again and again, black people got out less than so often. Marched alongside Martin Luther King and Stokely Carmichael and Floyd McKissick and Hollis Watkins and June Johnson and all these other giants of the civil rights movement. This was a 3-week march that expressed the depth of black people's grievances in Mississippi, but also the height of possibilities within. There's a story I tell again and again about this march whenever I get to talk about it, and particularly here in Mississippi. And it connects to the last day of the march. Many of you remember Elsie Dorsey. Right? She was a woman who, of course, has passed away. This is the story that ends the last chapter of the book. And to me, it captures the march's impact, not just in the big political terms, but in the personal terms, the spiritual terms. She's talking about how on that march on that last day, she decided not to bring her children because in the immediate aftermath of the violence in Philadelphia, it came for preservation. She feared her to be left. But as she was walking through the streets of Jackson, she regretted it. She wished she was wrong. She said, quote, "It was like a spiritual awakening. There was an energy that I have not felt before or since." The spirit reminded her of when she first got involved in the civil rights movement, the mass meetings in the Delta when she first became part of this movement. And then people started singing freedom songs as they got closer to the Capitol. She had a poetic way of talking. She talked about how she swore she could hear the individual voices of people that she'd been involved in the movement with, the Hollis Watkinses, the June Johnsons, and so on. And then she talked about how when they got to the Capitol, the singing stopped, and all you could hear was the crunch, crunch, crunch of their footsteps. And the marching stopped. She said that it got so quiet, it felt like even the birds stopped flying. There was something beautiful, and soulful, pure and uplifting in that last moment of beautiful sound. Thank you.
Awesome. Give them another hand. That was wonderful. I want to make sure that we recognize Representative Earl Banks, who was in the House, and Senator Hillman Fraser. We're still fighting for us every day. Now we're going to have a freedom medley by Miss Chandra Wise and the Grassroots Gospel Singers. Let's give them a hand again.
With us, okay?
now. Y'all can do better than that. We are in life right now. I'll put my tennis shoes on and march up to the gate. That's all right. That's all right. Now, this young lady I'm bringing up, I remember when we did the exhibition on the March Against Fear, and she was so excited about it. And she said, I'm gonna do the whole route. I remember it was black dark outside at midnight. And I said, "Rosa, you gonna drive up towards the bed?" Yes. And she did. So without further ado, I'm gonna bring her up. And that is Dr. Rosalind McCoy Sibley. Well, I will confess, I did not drive the entire race, but I was trying to prepare with it. And had I had some companion, I probably would have done it. But what I did end up doing was trying to retrace the step from capital or to, and I got as far as Kansas City because and I'm getting ahead of myself. I had a whole story. But since maybe this segue, I might as well tell you how it came. Can you hear me? So 10 years ago, at 50th anniversary celebration, we were at Woodworth Chapel at Toulouse College. And we had a crowd such as this. And so I asked what I thought was a simple question, which was, what is the root of the march? And it was like, you remember the old expression of the blind man, blindfolded man trying to describe the elephant and get their own interpretation, it's a road, it's a tree trunk, depending on where the vantage point was. So they had 50 different opinions. And some people said it came down to 1, and some people said it came down to 49. And I said, okay, well, I can understand that because it came from all over. And this is one consensus. People came from everywhere, right, Meredith? Meredith, talk about that because that's the day I met Meredith Coleman. And she was actually the one who put me on to this map, which was the basis of the article that I wrote about the American March route. And so it's basically the map of Mississippi here with a few additions because the one that was available online did not have two listed on there. So I knew something was wrong with that. I said, okay, I'll let you that. So, and Dr. Coleman, that's her name, Big Susie wrote the definitive book on March. And so when I later on read cover in about 2 days, I understood that there were a lot of stops that were depending on the map, but two portions of the one parts of the entire theater, and also the contribution of Jackson, Mississippi. So, greetings. The James March Against Fear years forward. This is on his second encounter with the state of Mississippi. And we celebrate James Meredith Esquire just 3 weeks before his 93rd birthday. His 60th anniversary, when he sincerely appreciates the Smith Robertson Museum and Co-Center of the city of Jackson for helping us to recognize the land and his milestone. Dr. Jesse Mosley led the effort to save the Smith Robertson
and the outlaw. The new Jesse Murphy Drive was cut in 2015, just in time for the 50th anniversary. It was a thrill to walk with Mr. Meredith and his entourage as he finally reached the front steps of the Capitol. The thrill is not gone, yet there is a new reality. Freedom of speech and its of democracy are attacked by Leo Confederates. No rumor is taken about James Meredith in school means that safe havens such as this are more essential than they have been appreciated over the last 50 years. This Robertson was the first public school for blacks in Jackson, but it is no longer a school, so I guess it's okay. Speaking of rumors, we are still waiting for that BB King restaurant, like the one in Memphis. Meanwhile, the 5 and 600 blocks of North Ferry Street should be considered the thriving section. The Ferry Street district has been controlled by African Americans since its inception over 120 years ago. That is why it holds record on the National Register of Historic Places as the most continuous black business district in the United States of America. Walking forward, the 21st century version may need to be a little bit more like the 20th century version of Ferry Street in downtown Jackson. As you ride from Capitol Street north, you will notice that Griffith Street has been renamed James Meredith Drive. As my mother used to say, God has a sense of humor. That street starts at the Capitol and runs to Middle Street, right past Mr. Meredith's building. And it sounds to me like that is a good place to hold a voter registration drive. Reminiscent of the ones that the march made famous. Mrs. Gladys Noel Bates was fired from her teaching job at Smith Robertson School in 1948. She filed a lawsuit because the segregated school system of Jackson refused to pay black teachers what they paid white teachers. So she was blackballed, she and her husband. They had to leave the state. They eventually had very prosperous educational careers in Denver, Colorado. Mr. Medgar Evers applied to the Mississippi Law School as part of the NAACP strategy articulated by then State Conference President Dr. E.J. Stringer. At that time, Attorney Carsey Hall was legal counsel, and Dr. A.H. was chair of the Legal Redress Committee. Both cases were part of the strategy of the National NAACP headquarters in preparation for Brown versus Board of Education. And this slide, nobody may have found application and you lawsuit. And everybody can see that is Mr. Evans. And I'm glad not my IT lady is here, so I guess she can just follow on with me because she's doing slides. In 1954, it's what can be affectionately called as Eureka in Topeka. there now in Hampton Roads, Virginia, who was stationed there with him. And he remembers when Brown versus Board of Education papers, and it was on the local news, and that young lady, Linda Brown, and her dad had persevered, and they were going to be in the integrated school. Mr. Meredith said then, we heard was that he's going to integrate the University of Mississippi. And so here we see Attorney Constance Baker Motley, who led his successful challenge against the Supreme Court with her mentor, Thurgood Marshall, and another one of the defense Attorney Greenberg. So James put his claim action in place in 1961. Mr. Evans, who was Mississippi State Field Secretary, guided Mr. Meredith from his personal experience. But for the Kennedys, Mr. Meredith would not have gotten into nor out of Ole Miss alive. They deployed the full force of the federal government to put down mobs of white race rioters. President Kennedy ordered federal officers to remain at James Meredith's side at all times until he graduated in 1963. It is important to remember that the road to justice was paved by lives and courageous women whose names are too often overlooked. 3 years later, the law began. Little did anyone know, LBJ, President Lyndon B. Johnson, and James Meredith was about to alter once again. On June 5th, 1966, year after the march from Selma to Montgomery, James Meredith set out from the Peabody Hotel in Memphis to walk 220 miles to the Mississippi State Capitol in Jackson on Highway 51 South. And as we are going to prove that blacks were, quote, free to walk with dignity without fear of terror or abuse, unquote, and I might add, without the protection of the National Guard or U.S. Marshals. In the movie, Forrest Gump said he ran across country for no particular reason. He just felt like running. James Meredith found that that luxury was not afforded to him. He did not do what the fictional Forrest Gump would do. On day 2, June 6th, after a gratifying stop with the Negro, as we start ourselves in Hernando, he started roads, and a few miles south of Hernando, he was shot. And he survived the potentially fatal shooting. And in my research, I have read, heard on some videos, and I had serious injuries, and different things to minimize the severity of that he sustained 2 blasts from a 16 gauge automatic shotgun filled with bird shot. Like text too well, but you can see some metallic pellets around. Now this is actually a bigger bullet than a real bullet, but the pellets are just smaller versions, and they're blood vessels, they're vital organs, and Mr. Meredith was shot in multiple locations. And we can see from the picture when he grabbed his leg, he was shot on his leg. He was also shot in his plank and his neck and the back of his head. The back of his head had to be shaved to remove some of the pellets. The bushwhacker, Aubrey James Lowell, committed attempted murder. It was a racially motivated hate crime, and it is doubtful whether he acted alone. But what he did was provide a catalyst which turned a personal pilgrimage, a walk, into the march, then a movement. Miss Meredith was taken to Gaston Hospital in Memphis and transferred to Bowles Hospital. As we've heard, Dick Gregory, Floyd McKissick, Dr. King, and others came to his bedside and pledged to continue the march. And the route was changed to include the Delta at the urging of Stokely Carmichael and New Hampshire. And as we have heard, in Philadelphia, in Shelby County, Mississippi, at the second year anniversary of the murders of Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner, Dr. Martin Luther King and Ambassador Andrew Young, who I had spoken to, he was invited, but he was unable to make it because he was going out of the country. But he told me that he still remembers being afraid for his life in Philadelphia, Mississippi. So for reasons that are hard for me to understand, there's been a relative lack of public attention given to Meredith Walk/March. Consequently, Mississippi have little or no regulation. So one of the takeaways here today is the 3 M's to help you remember and spread the word. The largest, longest, and last. Secondary to the March on Washington, the Meredith March was the largest in civil rights history. It was also the largest coalition of major black civil rights leaders ever assembled. It was the longest in duration and distance, and it was the last major protest of the era. The major stops, as we can see, somewhat if you maybe took this step to hop down and show you on the map. Hopefully, you all can kind of trace down from going down Highway 51. Batesville, as I learned from Dr. Susan's book, was a major stop, even though it was not identified on this map by the Clarion reporter at the time. And then Renee was another major stop. And during that stop was the same time, and I don't know if you ever heard it, but in the 2 museums and the memorials, all people who went. There's a man named Chester White, who I first learned about in regard to trying to do my research on this article. He was killed in the, I think it's the Homachita National Forest in order to lure Dr. King to the Nexus area to be killed. But he did not take that bait, he didn't go down there. But then Chester White was sacrificed during the march. At the same time, they went to Grenada. They also went to Greenwood, Indianola, Belzoni, where George Lee was killed, Kansas City, Canton, Tooele, and Jackson. So over 200 city miles were covered altogether. Even in little towns like Big Bear, Swifttown, Midnight, and Louise, they were uplifting memories made for a lifetime. In Greenwood, Philadelphia, and Canton was where the most violence occurred. As we've heard in Greenwood, Stokely Carmichael, Willie Riggs, and Bob Smith were provoked to lead the new chance, bringing to the world the notion of
subsequently informed us there were at least 3,000 marchers in Kenton. So by the time the travelers got to Hulu, that number had doubled. So straight out of Kenton, the marchers could finally feel safe as here out of the woods, filled with wild animals, and an island surrounded by rough seas, or an oasis, I guess. Mr. Meredith had not planned to stop at Tougaloo College originally, but he decided that he had recuperated long enough. He flew to Jackson and was a guest of Tougaloo's Dean, A.A. Branch. From there, he rejoined the march in Kenton and marched back to Tougaloo. Next slide, please. President George Owens had recently become the first Black inaugurated president of Tougaloo College, although he had been interim for 2 years. President Owens served 20 years, including when I graduated. He was my president. For 36 to 48 hours, President Owens quietly presided over the campus. He was fully responsible, having to answer for Hollywood celebrities, civil rights icons, high school students in summer programs, faculty and staff, and the board of trustees. All the while, an integrated mass of humanity was filling up the campus. And it was a scene unlike anything that had been conceived of in the state of Mississippi or most places, because this was 3 years before Woodstock. Tensions grew as the marchers, injured by police, appeared on campus. Tougaloo's Dr. Robert Smith, also a member of the Medical Community for Human Rights, treated some and triaged others. The ideological debate got louder about whether Dr. King and the militant Stokely Carmichael should appear on stage together. President Owens convened an advisory committee to settle the issue. Decades later, I learned from Tougaloo chaplain Ed King that my parents were influential in the decision to let leaders present a unified front. And you can see this is my mother right here, and this is my father right there. And there are other people who you can definitely recognize, but this pretty lady right here was the first lady of Tougaloo, Mrs. Ruth Douglas Owens. We do have her children in the audience, and we'll hear from them a little bit more. For a few wondrous hours, there was true solidarity as we dared envision a brighter for Blacks in Mississippi. That night, President and Mrs. Owens, Doctors A.H. and Rose McCoy, Paul, I.S. Sanders Jr., Gail, and I watched the rally and concert from the driveway of the president's house across from Donald Park with binoculars. The success of that night played a pivotal role in the overall outcome. It is my contention that among the most overlooked and underappreciated aspects of the entire event are not only what the march did for the civil rights movement, but what Tougaloo and Jackson did for the Meredith March. Day 21, June 26, 1966. Next slide, please. My dad took me to his office on Ferris Street. When the marchers passed by, he let me walk by myself in the crowd and told me, do not go off Ferris Street. At 12 years old, that was a big deal for me. So 50 years later, when I asked the question, what was the root of the march? And I realized no one knew the whole story. It has started for me a journey, and it really, has brought about an awakening and a feeling that mama may have, that papa may have, but God bless the child who's got his own. And so I feel that this is my contribution to the civil rights movement. And I would just like to, briefly talk about the root Jackson, which might not mean a lot to other people, but I think it would mean quite a bit to people in this audience. So if you all can see in this other map down here, when the marchers left Tougaloo Gate, they went down West County Line Road, which is now Tougaloo Village Road, and went to 51. And as you come into the city limits of Jackson, it is North State Street. And one of my classmates, Richard Brandon Jr., told me that he saw Mr. Meredith and Dr. King get in a car right in front of the house. And he also watched them turn right down Beasley Road, pass by Callaway when it was being built. Callaway was the last high school in Jackson that was built with the intentions of being segregated. But who knew, fast forward to take a few years, that I would be in the first class of graduating seniors during the forced busing 1970-1971 academic year, after there was no more freedom of choice. So when they got to Watkins Drive, they went toward that avenue, and Northside Drive, Watkins becomes because that was essentially a racial dividing line. So they went to down late to Woodrow Wilson. When they got to Woodrow Wilson, they had to make a little jog, one block jog down Pleasant Avenue. And the reason they couldn't just keep going down that avenue was because at that time, whites lived on that avenue between Woodrow Wilson and fortification. So blacks did not walk down the street in front of a white person's house. And, they made school children go on Pleasant Avenue, which really was not too pleasant, especially when you get down there by the curve, which is Railroad Avenue, and it becomes a little treacherous around there. So they looped around Wood Street and came to fortification and had to cross the tracks before the Fortification Street Bridge was built. Now they tell me, which is pretty rough, but if you had 10,000 people, maybe those engineers trying to meet their quota, deadline, whatever. So they told me they could break up those locomotives and start rolling toward those people, blowing those railroad whistles, and had people running across those tracks. So they got to Mill Street, and then went down toward downtown to Monument. And most of them probably went straight on to the Capitol. But as in keeping with some of the other places, they went through black neighborhoods and they went through town squares. So it would be only fitting for them to keep to down Mill Street to Capitol Street, and then make a little short loop to North Parish and go north to Monument and meet most of the marchers. Monument turns to High Street, and High Street is where the back steps of the Capitol are located, which is where Governor and there was a armed line of state troopers blocking West Street and President Street so that they could not go to the front steps of Capitol. So they made their way to the back steps, and that's where Mr. Meredith and the other leaders addressed the crowd. So after the 15 to 20,000 allies from across the country all went home, Meredith went to his home in Kosciuszko, Mississippi, and met his family and celebrated his 33rd birthday, which was the day before March 10th. The night of the Tulu rally was his 33rd birthday. So I just want to leave you with what I have concluded is that never underestimate the power of peaceful political protest. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sidley. Thank you so much for that historical, I guess what we could say, travel with them on that march. Now we're going to have the role of Tulu College, Canton Jackson, and James Meredith Walk. It's a short panel discussion with Dr. Frank Fitters, who is the moderator, Mr. Charles Taylor Sr., and the Honorable Senator Hillman Frazier. And while they're coming to the stage, let me give a heartfelt apology for Judy also Brooks and, of course, Dr. Meredith. Judy was so she went back home, and of course we know that Dr. Meredith probably wasn't going to come. But just to give my heartfelt thank you, he said to all of you for being here today.
Have the division and the oversight. Now, we have two families. All right. We have two panelists, and it's a unique thing about this panel. People are talking today a good bit about young people and how young people react to certain things. Without revealing anybody's age, of the three of us, there's only 1 year that separates our age. We were all teenagers at the time of the march. So I'm going to take a liberty, and that liberty is I'm going to allow each person to talk about their experience and how that experience, being in the march, knowing of its existence, impacted them in their lives. Now, I'm going to begin with Senator Frazier, because you may not know it, Senator Frazier is on a call, and the Mississippi legislature is trying to do some stuff that's going to be harmful to the people of the state of Mississippi. And he may get called from the panel. If he does get called, there is a range. Reverend Jim Evans is going to take his place. But then, after Gilbert Frazier responds to how this march impacted him and what he's doing, then we'll have Attorney Charles Taylor Sr., and he's going to talk about it. And then we'll see where we're going. And then we're going to leave room for questions and answers. But now they're going to provoke another question from me, I'm sure. Senator.
Thank you and good evening. I'm so glad to be with you today. As Frank mentioned, I am literally on two different calls right now. One on tax policy and also one on trying to save our rural hospitals. So, well, we can get the capital right now, but I thought this was very important for me to be here today. But James Meredith and tomorrow really affected me and what I'm doing today because he gave us the courage to answer the call that he made at the time. I served in the legislature right now, but I'm thinking about 1975. I was actually going to the Capitol in 1975. I went to money to apply for a position there because they employed no black above the quarter level. When I went to the Capitol in 1975, the first thing I saw was a big old bust of Billboard. He represents the worst and the worst of Mississippi. And I went to the third floor and I met with Buddy Newman, the Speaker of the House. He was the first legislator I met with at the time. But in 1975, you only had one black legislator, and that was Robert Clark. That's because he answered the call in 1967 and was elected to the House of Representatives. But Buddy Newman was old guard. He stood with Ross Barnett trying to keep James Meredith out of the University of Mississippi. And he was the man leading the House of Representatives. He was more concerned about soybeans than educating black kids in the Delta. So I met him and I spent time with Robert Clark. But Robert Clark was called because it was very important to have representation in the Capitol. And after the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1975, he ran in 67, he was elected and took office in 68. And he was the only black member there in 1975, but now we have 58. That's because many members answered James Meredith's call. And also we were able to use the Civil Rights Act of the Voting Rights Act 1965 to gain seats at the Capitol and also local level. We were able to use that act to increase our representation because we understood back then that we needed everybody at the table making public policy. And because we answered the call, we were able to sit at the table to make public policy. But today, that's being threatened. The Supreme Court just a couple of weeks ago ruled that a certain portion of our Voting Rights Act was no longer effective for us. And because of that, they said they can't use race as a reason for creating different districts. And that's what we used back from 1967 up until the present to increase our black presence at the Capitol. But right now, we need to answer a different call. We have many legislators, many public officials right now having open warfare on Benny Thompson. Congressman Thompson has been very good for the state of Mississippi in terms of bringing resources here, in terms of representing our people. He's the only Democrat in our congressional delegation, and he's been very good in terms of bringing resources to the state of Mississippi. When I turn on my shower every morning, I think about Benny Thompson. When I think about running water out of my sink, I think about Benny Thompson. He fought very hard to get us that. But right now, there's a movement afoot to sanitize the legislature, make it all white again. In 1975, it was all male, all pale. You had one black member and a couple of black females, but basically it was an all male social club back then. But they're trying to take us back to pre-1965. What they're doing, they're taking a page out of the playbook that their fathers used in 1890. As you know, in the Civil War, our people served. We had 64 members serving in the legislature. We had 3 statewide officials who were black. We sent 2 black senators to Washington, along with Congressperson. But they changed the game in 1890 by rewriting the Constitution, coming up with Mississippi Plan. Major voter suppression document of the day that was copied by many other states. They said in order to vote in Mississippi, you must be able to read, write, interpret the Constitution, pay a poll tax. Your grandfather must have been a registered voter in the state. And their provisions were challenged in our federal courts. And believe it or not, the federal court said that was okay because those provisions only applied to everybody. You couldn't single out blacks because it applied to whites also. but we know that those provisions was electorally applied. So the Supreme Court did very thing they're doing today in terms of trying to suppress our vote, trying to make sure that we don't make the progress. So that's the playbook they're using to try to suppress our vote, and also trying to make sure that they eliminate effective voices from our state capital and our Washington, our Congress in Washington. That's happening throughout the state. Look at our neighboring state of Alabama. They just reduced their black representation by one black congressional state. See, also in Louisiana, they did the same thing. Tennessee, they eliminated the only Democratic seat they had in the Memphis area. So our choice is to make sure that we do what we did back in the old days. We have to organize. We have to register. We have to vote. We have to talk about this every day because this is clear and present danger. This is not theory, it's happening right now. Because we sit down and let it happen, try to be defensive about what's going on. They're gonna take away every right you have and take you all the way back, not only 1975, but also take you back to 1865. So that's what the game plan is right now. But our try is to make sure that we educate our people in terms of what's going on. We have to have voter education, voter registration, and voter mobilization. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves losing grounds that we were able to make over the years. But like I said, we had other folks that asked a call back then. In addition to legislators, we had community activists who were very active in the process. I'm thinking about Mr. Winston Hudson in Lee County, and Sister Lovey. I'm thinking about Dolores Ora here in Jackson, Doris Smith, and others. I'm thinking about Ms. Dr. Florence Bill Wright. I'm thinking about her because they made a very big impact in terms of national call to make sure that we have a seat at the table. But unless we do what we did back in the old days, organizing in different communities, our homes, our streets, we're gonna find ourselves going way back. In terms of representation, we're gonna find out that if we wait around, we won't have representation on the federal level or on the state level. So that's why I charge today to be fearless. Walk to the courthouse, take someone with you, register, vote, and also, like I said, tell our history to our young people because a lot of them don't know how we got the right to vote through the blood, sweat, and tears of organization of so many people. If they don't know the history, it's our fault because we know it's our obligation to teach it to them. But we must organize, educate, and mobilize in order to keep from going backwards in this state. I appreciate the contribution of James Meredith. He is my hero. And we must make sure that we do all we can to make sure that his walking was not in vain. We have to make sure that we keep on walking forward as opposed to going backwards. So thank you all for allowing me to be here today. And I look forward to being a part of this panel.
Hello, everyone. I feel real good about this audience. I get a soulful feeling from you all. It is my honor, pleasure, and privilege to be able to sit here and tell you about my life experiences. You hear me now? It's an honor to tell you about my life experiences and observations, particularly those ones that occurred at Tugadoo College 60 years ago. I was 15 years old, and I was I was in high school, but I was attending a summer science program at Tugadoo. My best friend there, D. Howard Owens Severe, was also one of the participants in that program. And also during that time, I met Frank Figures, who was also participating in one of the programs during that time. We were all in high school, but Tugadoo was a special place. When nowadays, I have 3 children and I have 5 grandchildren. And we go out to eat and we all sit at the table. Everybody's either looking at a cell phone or iPhone or iPad. And it would make me, see, it was like my father would lose his mind seeing that. Because you want to tell them so bad, let's put these cell phones down, let's put these iPhones down. Let's talk to each other. And actually, that's the way I would feel. I want them to put these phones down let me tell you about what happened in Tougaloo 60 years ago. Let me tell you about what James Meredith did, you know. All of the great things that he did, the things that you need to know about. Uh, and back to my father, I can appreciate him more now than I did when I was younger because he always wanted to tell us these stories. You know, when you get my age, you realize you like to share your experiences with people, you know. And he particularly liked the time that he spent in the army. He would always like to tell you these army stories. And we moved to Jackson in the mid-60s, but he only had a couple more years before he retired, so he continued to, well, I'm from Yazoo City. He continued to live in Yazoo City, and he took in teachers. He had rooms for teachers. And he always cherished the opportunity when he could get those teachers together, he could talk to them about his army stories. And it really got so bad that he would start to tell them about his stories, and they would throw pennies at him. He would just sit there and pick up the pennies and continue to tell his story, you know. So if any of y'all want to throw pennies up here, throw them, and I'll pick them up because I'm going to continue to tell you the story about what happened during the 60s at Tougaloo College, okay? Now, before I get started, I'd like to thank Dr. Rosalind McCoy Sibley for inviting me to participate on this panel. We go back, we have a long history. I actually was supposed to teach her how to drive, but it didn't really work out. But then she did learn how to drive. I was able to give her a couple of lessons as far as we could go. But her mother, Dr. Rose McCoy, was head of the psychology department at Jackson State. And in 1968, she hired my mother to join her staff. So, and this was something that my mother really enjoyed. She worked at Jackson State from 68 for 12 years until she retired in 1980. And this is also a very, very special day for me because today is my mother's birthday. She was born June 4th, 1970. And now let's get back to the subject at hand. I'd like to share my witness of the Meredith March against fear when they came to the Tougaloo campus. You have to understand, Tougaloo was a special place. Tougaloo was like the vanguard of civil rights in Mississippi. It was a safe haven. And I never really understood why, but you never had to worry about our biggest nemesis was the law enforcement. You never had to worry about law enforcement coming on Tougaloo's campus. And it was only years later that I understood why that existed. The state had passed a law that law enforcement could only come on Tougaloo's campus if the president gave his permission. Well, George Owens was the president at the time, vowed that he would never give his permission for them to come on their campus. So that's what made Tougaloo a safe campus. Okay. Now, I will get into talking about what happened during the Meredith March, but I want to take a little quick detour. I graduated from Tougaloo in 1971, and my major was history. And it was at Tougaloo that I understood the value of my major. You know, if you don't know where you came from, very difficult to know where you're going. But not only that, history is like a measuring bar for progress. When you look at the time, this was what was happening then. This was the decade of the 60s. I consider the 60s sort of a renaissance for Black people. Okay, 60s was a time that we realized that we were just as human as everybody else, you know, and that we should be treated equally like everybody else. We realized that it was proud to be Black. We realized that Black was beautiful. You know, James Brown wrote a song, "Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Brown." You know, we started putting out the straight iron down and started wearing our hair natural. When we started wearing the afro, we started wearing dashikis. We started identifying with our culture. And all of this was taking place in the 60s. And the Meredith March was just one of many protests that took place in the 60s. And the reason for the protest is that we were protesting for equality and inclusion. You see, because you got to understand at that time we were very more segregated than we are now and more unequal than we are now. When it came to public accommodations, you know, we went to a public facility, if they had a restroom that you could use, they had a white-only restroom and they had a colored-only restroom. And you was at a service station, the white-only restroom would be on one side of the station, the colored-only restroom on the other side. On the white side, the restroom was state-of-the-art. Colored on the side, you might want to do better going out back. You know, same thing existed for water fountains. You know, they had these water fountains, colored only water fountains, white only water fountains. The white only water fountain was new machines, state of the art. The colored only water fountain, probably rusty, you might not even want to drink the water. Same thing existed, they had white hotels and colored hotels. Here in Jackson, they had the King Edward, where the Hilton is downtown now. That was the King Edward Hotel. If you didn't shine shoes down there or work in maintenance or maybe food services, it would probably be to your benefit not to even pass by the place. They did not want you down there. And the same thing existed for the Heidelberg Hotel. But we had our hotels. We had the Edward Lee Hotel. It was right down on Ferry Street, right off Ferry Street. And we had the Summers Hotel. And those places ended up being quite famous because you had a lot of big-time entertainers that came to Jackson, couldn't go to the white hotel, so they had to stay at the black hotel. And they would often entertain while they were at the black hotel. So some of those places became very well known and very famous. Same thing existed with restaurants. We couldn't go to Primo's. We couldn't go to Crystal. We couldn't go to Morrison Cafeteria. You had places like Woolworths. Woolworth was one of the most, I guess it was the modern day Walmart. Woolworth was in the center of downtown. And Woolworths, you know, kids love Woolworths. They had toys and women love Woolworths because they could buy their fabric from there, all this kind of thing. But they had a lunch counter. And we couldn't use that lunch counter. You know, later they decided, well, because of the protest, we'll let them come in and eat, but they got to get it to go. So, you know, we didn't like that. So again, we got the protest. And that's what created what was known as the sit-in. And oftentimes back to Tougaloo, the groups would meet at Tougaloo and work out their strategy, come into Jackson and do what they prepared. So with the sit-ins at Woolworth, they came out to Tougaloo, talked about what they would do, they went to Jackson, sit in at Woolworths, which I thought was kind of crazy because you sit there and they just torture you, just, you know, following Dr. King's theory of nonviolence. You just sit there and let them do whatever they wanted to do, you know. But it worked because when the world saw how bad those people were treated at the sit-ins, they said, no, you can't do that. We got to integrate, you know, we can't not integrate these places. So as a result, the Woolworths lunch counter had to be integrated. But Woolworths was so bad that they went out of business rather than integrate their lunch counter. But you had those kind of problems going on. Also, the same thing existed for the school system. We couldn't go to Proline. We couldn't go to Merle. We couldn't go to Central. We couldn't go to Chestnut, you know, but we could go to these other schools. And in my hometown of Yazoo City, there were 2 schools for blacks. They had a private Catholic school, St. Francis Catholic School, And then you had number two. You know, the word would just roll out the tongue. Number two. I'm going to number two. Number two is having graduation today. Number two is having, and we never understood why we called it number two, but it was number two. But during that time, they decided to renovate the high school. And they had these metal letters out front that never, most of the letters were missing. So they did the high school, they wrote on the school, Yazoo City High School number one. And we realized that's why we're number two. He said, this is not gonna work. So now we protesting. We don't want to be Yazoo High School number two. So people decided, okay, you'll no longer be Yazoo High School number two. We're gonna call you Yazoo City Training School. So when they did that, we first got it, well, okay, we'll accept Yazoo City Training School, because we're no longer number two. But then when we went on band festivals and choir festivals in different places, the people would ask you, where are you from? You tell them, we're from Yazoo City Training School. They go, Oakley? No. So then we realized we did not want to be called Yazoo City Training School, because it carried the connotation that we were a juvenile detention center or something. So we had a teacher that was he happened to be the girls' basketball coach, but the teacher at the school, he was a very good singer. So he gave us a school song, and the name of the song was YCTS, and it was to the tune of Danny Boy. So now we got a nice school song, and now we are YCTS. So when we go off on the band trips, they ask you about choir trips, wherever they are. Where you from? We said, we're from YCTS. What does that mean? Don't worry, we from YCTS. Don't worry about what that means. We from YCTS. So it was just awful how, racism even reared its ugly head back during that time. But the good news, later in life, they did decide to name the high school, the middle school, and the elementary school after Black educators. So they changed the name of Yazoo City Training School to N.D. Taylor High. So N.D. Taylor, Newman Taylor was one of the former principals of N.D. Taylor High. So they did, straighten out that problem. Okay. So I won't burden you with a lot of the other problems. We had a swimming pool. We didn't have swimming pools. Whenever we wanted to swim in a public place, we had to come to Jackson. And where Lee Assembly Center is now is where the city pool was for Black people. But when it came time to integrate the swimming pool, they did not want to do that. They filled a lot of pools up with cement because they did not want us swimming in their pools. So, and of course, churches, the churches were segregated. Now, the one thing I want to talk about too is municipal services. On the white side of town, the municipal services were state of the art. And on the black side of town, you might have a telegram post sitting in your front yard, wires hanging all over the place. They had gas meters that probably didn't work, electric meters that may work or not, So you had legal services that was kind of all over the South, beginning to file what you call municipal equalization suits. So they were filing suits, and it was working. They were filing in federal court, and the federal court would rule until the black side of town's municipal services were brought up to the level of the white. No money could be spent on the white side of town until the services on the black side of town were brought up to that level. So it kind of worked. And some of the smart, genius people at legal services decided, well, if that's working for municipal equalization, maybe we could try this for college education. And they did. And that was the birth, I don't know if you are familiar with it, but that was the birth of the Ayers case. And
what the Harris case stood for was that until Jackson State, Alcorn Valley State was brought up to the level of the Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Southern, you couldn't spend money, in those colleges. Well, they grappled with that for 25 years. In the beginning, they decided, well, we'll just have a one system situation for the state of Mississippi. So, Ole Miss will become the University of Mississippi at Oxford. Mississippi State will become the University of Mississippi at Starksville, and so on. Same thing with Jackson State. But the problem that they ran into, they didn't put a white college in the metropolitan area. So all of the plans that they came up with, Jackson State would be the flagship university. They was not doing that. So one thing they decided maybe remedy the problem, at that time we had 24 junior colleges. There was one junior college for every 4 counties. So they said, well, what we'll do, we'll combine 8 of these junior colleges and we'll form Hines Community College. They did that. They formed Hines Community College overnight. They had 10 times the budget of Jackson State. But they realized, wait a minute, Hines Community College, this is a newly formed thing. This is not going to work. We can't make Hines the flagship university. So what ended up happening, they just grappled back and forth with it for, like I say, over 25 years until the Harris case just finally died of natural death. They agreed, we'll make you offer some concessions, just let this go. So that's where we are with that today. Okay. Also, I kind of leave off the ones with the voting, the problem we had with voting. People lost their lives trying to vote. And people also lost their lives who was trying to vote. But I move on to why I was here, just to talk about what happened at Tougaloo during the Meredith March. The Meredith March took place at Tougaloo, I think it was the 4th weekend in June of 1966. That Friday, the marchers began to trickle into the campus around 12 o'clock that Friday. And it was thousands of people. But my first notice was that they made the white people walk the ditches. The deacons of defense wouldn't let the white people walk on the street. They had to walk the ditches. I really thought that was wrong because these people were there, joining in. They were trying to help us. And if you wanted to show how bad you were, go make, one of those Ku Kluxers do something. Don't mess with these people. But that's what happened. So anyway, the people came into the campus. There were thousands. They were coming hand in hand. I guess about 4 foot away that the people came in, here came Dr. King, Stokely Carmichael, hand in hand. And I go, that's good to see. But it was strange because they were kind of diametrically opposed to the movement. Dr. King was for nonviolence. Stokely was not. Stokely believed that if they attack you, you attack them back. He didn't believe in sitting there and just let people beat on you and that kind of thing. But by the time they made it to campus, they walked on campus hand in hand. And people were scattered. You probably couldn't find an empty space on campus. People just camped out all over the campus. So they spent that night. The next day, they got up, and the maintenance workers from the school went down to Sawmill, and they got the rough cut lumber, and they made 2 stages. They made a stage where the speakers would speak, and they had a stage for the performers, for the entertainers. So starting about 6 o'clock that Saturday evening, they had what you could call a protest rally. It was really like a pep rally. And it was really an amazing thing because now you had celebrities from all over the country
people there, the big three were there. The big three was Bill Cosby, Harry Belafonte, and Sidney Poitier. They came and they spoke. We had a lot of big name Jews that were there. Moses was there. Charleston Heston, he came, he spoke. Marlon Brando spoke. Tony Bennett's son and spoke. You know, at this time we had Dick Gregory was the MC, and Dr. Cambridge was also an MC. And it was an amazing time, but yet it was a scary time also. You had helicopters hovering above. And periodically, Godfrey Cambridge, who was a comedian, he would say, okay, don't drop no bombs. You know, that was not funny because people were really afraid that that could happen. You know, we were getting a lot, people were threatening, they were telling the marchers not to come into Jackson. If they came into Jackson, they were going to be met with serious resistance. But considering what had happened to James Meredith, these people didn't care. They were there to support him. They didn't feel like a person that was trying to lead a peaceful protest should suffer like that, should be shot. So then people from all over the country came and they supported him. So that happened that evening. So the next, I'll tell you right quick, so the next night, the next day, they actually had mapped out two routes into Jackson. One route would go up State Street, 51, the other route would go up Hanging Miles. And I'll tell you this quick, I'll let it go. They came, when the route that went out to Hanging Miles, there were about 25, maybe 30 hecklers there, and they were calling people, you know, racial slurs. They say, all about it, and they left. The rest of the march went into Jackson. Good thing that happened as a result. And now, after this march, the white only, colored only signs began to go down. We started going to Primos, we started going to Bristol, we started going to the hotel that we could go to. And of course, a lot of the, you know, the rest of the story. Some significant stuff is going to come out. Now, I'll say one thing about it, and that is the role of the medical personnel. Yeah. Dr. McCoy, A.H. McCoy, as well as Dr. Britt, Dr. Shirley, Dr. Miller, Dr. Smith, and Dr. Anderson. All well except Dr. Anderson, who was alum. And they set up after the marchers were attacked in Canton. They set up a field hospital in the chapel of Toulouse College. It's Woodworth Chapel, Dr. Brown. And they conscripted ambulances from Peoplesville home in Canton, Peoples in Jackson, Collins, Cook, that's it, yeah, and Denton. And they served as transport vehicles from Canton to Jackson. And in the triage unit, in the basement of the chapel, they determined who needed to go to the hospital or who they could release back. And they did that because even though it was 1966, Mr. Taylor just said, still segregation, and it was deeply embedded. Now, I got that out on the record. I see some of the authors have left, but I wanted that out because the role of the medical personnel in Mississippi was extremely significant. Now, questions. We are going to allow questions, this illustrious panel. And I'm going to recognize from the Let me go from the furthest from them first. Anybody? If not, Mr. King.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you very kindly. I'm George Logan. I'm from Michigan. I escaped from Michigan in 1984 and came to Mississippi to take care of my disabled grandparents that live 80 acres in Tennessee. And my granddad lived to be 99, my grandmother lived to be 94. I didn't want the South because it was too hot. I've been here 39 years and it's still hot. But my comment, the more history that I'm receiving, I understand why the great God had me born and raised in Michigan. Because I was thinking, just using my imagination, when people put dogs on people, I would have had a bag of ammonia. And I probably wouldn't be here today. So God being brilliant at me point here. My comment or question is, with the strategy of what's going on, because different people now are leaving on defense, they get on the offense, wouldn't economics be one of the strategies? Like different people said at Mother's Day, don't buy flowers and give money gifts. Isn't economics part of the strategy to change things? Always economics is a very important part of the strategy. If you go to any restaurant, it is a week in Jackson, who are you going to see? Our people there. With the whole dollar, we can't get their attention. And also, one thing that we can do to get their attention is athletics. We're trying to pass adopt a new flag. The business people and the coaches and the players came together and they listened. Right now, if you know what's going on, see what's going on in South Carolina, they were called on by President Trump to get rid of a black congressional district. But the female coach, Don Staley, said that if you mess with those districts, I'm out of here. And when she said that, the Senate backed off trying to destroy that black district. If our SEC coach did the same thing, saying that if you mess with these black districts in the South, we out of here, because they can't get jobs in other places. But Don Staley was very courageous. When we tried to change the flags, these coaches and athletic directors came together, along with these football players. Callan Hill, and Mississippi State said that he's out of here. He won't depend on the state flag, on the old state flag. But economics will play a very important role in terms of getting the attention of policymakers, because they understand the dollars and you have to hit them where it hurts. And like I said, if you withhold the dollars, it would get their attention in terms of what we're doing. But right now, there is warfare going on. This is no theory, it's real. They are trying to eliminate black districts throughout the country. And you're gonna feel that in the South more so than others, because we have a lot of black representation in the South. But if we go toward economic warfare, withhold those dollars, and also talk to our athletes and SEC people and our coaches about the impact it's gonna have on their recruiting, policymakers gonna hear them, and also you're gonna draw back in terms of trying to eliminate these black districts that we have throughout the South.
I don't have a question about the rally at Superloop. What do you think was driving the crowd there? Was it celebrities or what do you think it was, or hope for the picture?
I think it was the fact that he got shot. And the people that, it was just, that's one reason I was there and I wanted to be part of it, because, it was wrong for them to shoot him. That was the wrong thing to happen. So I think that if he had not gotten shot and it was kind of a solo thing that he was doing, it would not have had nearly the attention that it got. But once he got shot, people from all over the country, I think that was a reason.
Capitol rally?
No, I didn't, but honestly, I didn't leave Tougaloo that day. We were not.
They said that my uncle got the biggest amount of supplies at the Capitol rally. Even though they were celebrities there.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting, even though all celebrities were there.
Right, right,
So that's part of it, and they were there.
right. No, yeah, but I didn't go down there, but we definitely talked about what happened, you know, we know that it basically went on without a hitch. Yeah.
Mr. Brown, right? I'm making that pocket club.
Let me try and put a postscript on your question. We felt such a sense of accomplishment. Mr. Meredith had begun that march almost 200 miles before we got to Tougaloo. And we felt such a sense that we were almost there. You know, when you go on vacation, and you're in the station wagon with 5 or 6 of your siblings, and you go to grandma's house, and you're 10 miles from grandma's house. You know how you feel just to see grandma? We felt such a sense of accomplishment that we stayed together all that time and that we had an opportunity to be entertained. I was there, and I even got the flyer in my book. Because again, we felt that, wow, we just about made it. 200 miles, not 7. And so that was my take on that because, you know, I was there and I think the pond, Dr. Hogan, the pond that's there now, that wasn't there then. Because that's where we all assembled. That's where we all sat on the ground and listened to Eartha Kitt and I think Lena Horne and some of the Lauren Green, I think James Brown, but anyway, James Brown. I'm black and I'm proud. So we just felt that we were just a few miles away from our goal. That's my take on it. Thank you.
We agree, we completely concur. The unprecedented show of resistance and unity was the aura in the air on the campus of Tougaloo College.
My question is, what was the comment and the question? Tougaloo was the inspiration for people in Jackson, for the students in Jackson. I was going into Tougaloo class 66, 67, that group. And for us to have a place and to know that there is a place where black folk can be proud and black. And that there was some group who actually welcomed us and taught us what it meant to stand up for yourself. And Tougaloo was a safe place. I mean, I lived in Jackson and marched on Berry Street, Church Street. I never got picked up, but Mama said she was gonna kill us if we got caught. Y'all gonna do it, but you better not get caught. So growing up in Jackson downtown, we knew how not to get caught. And for me, for the Lanier class of 66, to know that there was a place where we could go and be safe and say His word. And I think that's the role Tougaloo plays even today. Is that there is a place where the doctors came from, most of the black doctors Tougaloo, the lawyers, for youth today to know that that still exists. And for those of us who were there, who were in the city, in that area, the role of Tougaloo and Jackson, I'm saying Jackson State, Jackson, to say this is what's real and happening in Jackson right now. The march last week, before last, from Old Capitol, the convention center, a lot of old folk are still there. But there's a young voice that I think the role of Tougaloo and Jackson has now is to open up to the they need and to hear their process, what they want. So I think that's the role. That's the role that Mr. Meredith taught us is possible. I mean, the youth now cannot imagine being shot at.
We can't imagine it. It's not real to me. That's something in movies. But to see and all these old people and people I know were there, because I was there with them, that's what we need to do. As a Tougaloo, and I stay to all the Tougaloo I can, we need to go to Tougaloo. So it's about finding some money, giving some dollars to Tougaloo so they can have some scholarships for these children to go where it's safe, and it's still safe.
Let's give this esteemed panel of lawyers a rousing round. And give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you all. Oh, that's lawyer.
Very short.
I gotta say something.
Hello, thank you for your story. It was most enlightening for me. I, like that gentleman over there, was from Michigan. That's where I was born and raised. And I moved here in 1998 from Detroit. But as a young person in Michigan, I was extremely inspired by the movement that I watched on TV. I graduated from high school in 1971 and then went to Spelman from 71 to 75. And so I met a lot of people. That was my first time meeting a lot of young women who were from the South, who were from Mississippi and from Alabama and in all the places that, that I watched on TV. But I just want to say, because I could talk for a long time, so we all know that. But I just want to say how inspirational all of you all were when I was watching on TV. And I wish that I could be down here. I wish I had been old enough, to be down here and be in this movement. In Detroit in 1963, we had a march with Martin Luther King. And we had a march with Martin Luther King in 1963, and I was almost 10, I was 9. My parents would not let me go because they were afraid there might be trouble. They went, but they thought I was too little. But anyway, so from the time that I was a girl, I have watched the movement. I'm very with what happened, and I'm very happy to have met a lot of the people who were involved, including Mr. Meredith. That's all.
Thank you. Now we're going to have words from Ms. Hazel, which is James Meredith's sister.
Hello, everybody. I just want to emphasize the fact that we're still concerned about our children and their education. And he did a pamphlet some years ago about what the parents should teach their children from birth to 6. And that is being redone. And hopefully it will be finished before his birthday on the 25th. And it should be available to everybody then.
I just want to acknowledge that we have the Eagle Queen in our midst, and because of her, I'm talking about you, Beverly Helping. Just wanted to acknowledge that she's in the room, the first African-American female at Tubing College. We also have Yes, yes. Next week, Miss Gail Owens Bay will be making a presentation to Blue College. You want to speak? Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity for me to make this presentation. I have a personal historical document that my mother actually had created for me around the time of the James Meredith March. And it's been in our home. I had it historically preserved. It's always been my intent to give it to the college, and this seemed like the right opportunity to do that. Let me also say, with me today is my brother, Adi Severe, and we are both the proud children of George and Ruth Owens. And I'm also proud to identify the fact that he was the first Black president at Tougaloo, and was the president at the time of the James Meredith March. You've heard about all that already, so I won't labor that. But I would like for Dr. Bound and President Meredith Hogan, please come up and receive this document. Received it because it's going to be the caretaker. But thank you so much. Yes, thank you for being here. So so I was a young child at the time when the march occurred on campus. And as Ralston was saying, we had the opportunity to watch it from the president's home. My mother, unbeknownst to me, made sure that I had autographs from famous people who were there at the march. So this document actually has autographs of Dr. Martin Luther King, Ralph David Abernathy, Marlon Brando, Brown, the author of A Man-Child of Promised Land, and Lillian and Dick Gregory, along with others. It was historically preserved, but the ink is beginning to fade. I want to make sure that Tougaloo Archives has this as a way of punctuating the march being present on campus. So thank you for receiving it. And I want to say that the new president at Tougaloo College was present, but he had to be again.
Let's give them one more hand, please. Program is about to end, and let me let you know that there is a reception following. So I saw some sweet potatoes in the atrium, so some good food. So now we'll have Miss Angela Stewart, the archivist of Margaret Walker. Thank
you, Ms. Pam. And I want to personally thank Ms. Cynthia Goodlow Palmer for the invitation to present today. And I'm doing two things very quickly: recognition of sponsors and closing remarks. And I say very briefly, but I'm going to make a quick personal statement, because somebody used the word inspiration. And James Meredith was a great inspiration to my father. They were both graduates of Jackson State University and members of the United States Air Force. And my dad and the community of Jackson State looked at James Meredith and his getting into the University of Mississippi. And I want you to understand that I went to the 50th anniversary. And the then chancellor said the only good thing about that is that 50 years later, he wouldn't be around for the 100th anniversary. There were U.S. Marshals who were still scarred by having experienced protecting James Meredith. They couldn't understand how he could stay in Mississippi, have hope for Mississippi, after all of that violence, to come back in 1966 and say, I'm going to do a march against fear, against all of this hatred and violence that he had just experienced 4 years earlier. So that is my thing. I want to thank the Meredith family and their contributions, because it was not only traumatic for James Meredith, but it was traumatic for the Meredith family. So thank you all. But now, recognition of sponsors. That's the first of my tasks. And you see them on your program, so you can follow along with me. The James Meredith Walk Against Fear 60th Anniversary Committee. We've already heard that Dr. Judy Alston-Brooks Meredith is not here, so we thank her in her absence. And of course, Ms. Cynthia Palmer and Dr. Rosalind McCoy Sibley, a proud product not only of Tougaloo College, but of this Fair Street district. The American Civil Liberties Union of Mississippi, Mr. Jarvis Dortch, Executive Director. Doctors Anthony and Rosalind Sibley. In his absence, I haven't seen John Horn, Mayor of Jackson. And also, we're at the Smith Robertson Museum and Cultural Center, which is part of the Human and Cultural Services Division of the City of Jackson. So let's thank them as well. Evans Writing Solutions, LLC. We Believe Digital.com, and I know Mr. Socrates Garrett is here, and I'm looking at it. Yeah. The Jackson Advocate, another one of our longtime papers. Publisher, Mrs. Deanna Tisdale Johnson, and her mother, who's publisher emerita, Mrs. Alice Thomas Tisdale. Mr. Phil Noble, veterans of the Civil Rights Movement, and we have already heard from Dr. Frank Figures, who's vice chairman, and of course, again, Ms. Cynthia Palmer, who serves as executive director of that organization. And an organization close to my heart and to the heart of Dr. Flossie Brown Goodlow Wright, Women for Progress of Mississippi, Mrs. Willie Jones, president. Now, the second half, my dear, closing remarks. We have come together this afternoon to celebrate and reflect on the extraordinary courage of Dr. James Meredith and the profound impact he has had not just in Mississippi, but throughout American history. His steadfast example teaches us that we hold the power to create change through our hands, our hearts, our mind, and feet. Now more than ever, we are called to embody that change. Registering to vote is only the beginning. We must actively cast our votes and inspire others to engage in the political process. You know, we're here at Smith Robertson School, and the school did a lot to inspire young African-American children in this community that they could make the world a better place. And people like Gladys Noel Bates, they took on challenge here in this school, Smith Robertson School. But we always remember that Mr. James Meredith represents the incredible power of one fearless individual to ignite the actions of many. To conclude, I want to share a brief poem, excerpt from a poem, not a whole poem, The Power of One by Roy D. Peterson. You think that you're alone, there's nothing to be done. But I say you have strength. It is the power of one. One in victory one. Take courage, earthly. You have power of one. Thank you again to Mr. James Meredith for inspiring us to rise against fear and to work tirelessly for a better Mississippi and a better world. Thank you.
If you want to be proud of yourself, you have got to do things you can be proud of. You want to be proud of yourself, you have got to do things you can be proud of. That came from Osceola McCarthy. We have work to do. We have work to do. We have work to do. And as the people of the movement would say, a luta continua. A luta continua. A luta continua. A luta continua. The struggle continues. Thank you so much. Food is in the atrium.